We finally made it. After all these hours of waiting in airports, we have finally made it to Ushuaia and boarded our cruise ship. On the next 17 days, we will experience some of the wonders of the natural world and hopefully learn some new things along the way. Our family is here on the second night of our cruise, having a formal dinner. Tomorrow, we will be heading out to the Falkland Islands. We have no idea what is in store for us, but hopefully, our cruise will be one that is to remember. Our first stop is Grave Cove in the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands is a group of over 100 islands, consisting of two main islands, East Falkland and West Falkland. It's home to some of the wonders of the natural world. When we arrived at Grave Cove, we walked a few hundred meters over some hills, and on the other side, there it was, Grave Cove. Our first stop, and had a look at some amazing wildlife. These are our first penguins, well, my first penguins, other than the little penguins that live on Phillip Island. These gentoo penguins are the largest of the brush-tailed species. Never had I seen so many penguins in one place. And certainly had I never seen a baby penguin that was only a few weeks old. Our naturalist guide also told us that the penguins generally nest about a foot away from each other so that they can protect themselves from the other penguins' beaks and also protect themselves from predators. These penguins have just come back from a morning swim and are trying to find out where their nest is located. We only got to see this one group of Magellanic penguins on our whole trip because these penguins don't come any further south than the bottom tip of South America. After Grave Cove, we boarded the Zodiacs and headed back to the ship. Our next stop was West Point Island. West Point Island had a small township. Well, it wasn't really a township. There were 2 people living there, and this was their farm. We walked over a kilometre through rain, hail and snow, and finally made it to a rocky outcrop on the other side of the island. Here we found hundreds, if not thousands, of black-browed albatross and rockhopper penguins, living together like a small community. The rockhopper penguins nest amongst the black-browed albatross who protect them from the dangers of the scavenging caracaras. The black-browed albatross have a wingspan of 2 to 2.4 meters and have a natural lifespan of over 70 years. Leaving the Falkland Islands, we had 2 days at sea, travelling to South Georgia. While on board, we enjoyed the magnificent smorgasbord available to us. We also made use of the gym, library, games room, bar areas, and visited the captain on the bridge. We attended many lectures in the theatre about all aspects of our journey. Our first stop at South Georgia was at Fortuna Bay. Going ashore by Zodiac, we were amazed to have our first sighting of the magnificent king penguins. We were lucky enough to see a few South Georgia pintails, which are endemic to South Georgia. The southern giant petrel is another predator that penguins must watch out for, because they try to steal king penguin eggs or young chicks who are a couple of weeks old and start to wander from their parents to explore. The penguins live in tight groups with the nesting parents and young chicks on the inside of the flock, and the older chicks and lone parents towards the outside of the flock for protection. This petrel was eating the carcass of a baby elephant seal. Also living ashore at Fortuna Bay were southern fur seals. We were extremely fortunate to see 2 to 3 week old babies because they were not born when this cruise ship last visited Fortuna Bay a couple of weeks prior. They were so cute and had big puppy dog eyes. They must compete with the penguins for food, but both are prey for the mighty killer whales. Our ship La Soliale is a French cruise ship, and the French celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. We had a magnificent 5-course meal in the formal dining room. Christmas came a little later for us than it usually would, about 14 hours later to be precise. We had the chance to visit the grave of Sir Ernest Shackleton, a famous Antarctic explorer. We had a toast, a speech was made, and we poured whiskey over his grave. Grytviken is an old whaling town that was used in the 18 and 1900s. Fortunately, when they had killed nearly all the whales, they decided to leave because it was no longer worthwhile. The remnants of the whaling station are still there, and we were able to check out lots of the old machinery that was used to process the whales. When whaling first began, the whalers mainly wanted the whale's blubber. This blubber could then be heated to extreme temperatures and be turned into an oil that was used to light up the streets of London before lights were invented. Just as the boats that were used to hunt the whales evolved, so too did their harpoons. The whalers soon discovered that a pointed harpoon slid off the whale's back and rarely penetrated their tough hide. The tip of the harpoon was then made into a square shape with pointed edges. This proved much more successful. When the whalers arrived, there were also hundreds of elephant seals, and since the seals also have blubber, why not hunt them? Could you believe that the elephant seals at Grytviken that we saw weren't even 1 year old? Bull elephant seals have large trunks that look similar to an elephant's trunk, which is how they got their name. While we were there, I met up with a teacher from my high school that was working on South Georgia for 4 months. How cool is that? After looking at a bit of the town, we walked up a mountain and found a reservoir at the top. They used the power that the reservoir generated to power the station. We had a magnificent view over the bay in Grytviken. When we got back down, we had a look in the museum and found an exact replica of the James Caird that Shackleton used in his expedition. Once we were back on the ship, everyone gathered around the pool and Santa arrived on a Zodiac, bearing gifts for all the kids on board, before we enjoyed our Christmas lunch. On Christmas afternoon, we entered St. Andrews Bay, South Georgia. Going ashore, we were greeted by 300,000 to 400,000 king penguins. They were again living in large colonies to protect themselves from scavenger birds. The brown patches were actually thousands of young king penguins that were living in creches. They wait for their parents to come back from the ocean with food, and the parents must find their youngster among the thousands of other chicks by listening for their baby's voice. The sound of the king penguins all calling out for one another was absolutely deafening. He said that you got Every penguin goes through an annual molt when they remove all of their old feathers and grow back new feathers. Penguins need to molt because their feathers wear out and are what makes the bird waterproof. Penguins must stay on land for 2 to 3 weeks fasting while their new feathers begin to grow. We found an extremely rare leucistic southern fur seal. A leucistic animal is an animal that was born without pigment in its skin, making it white. This can be found in many other animals around the world. The brown skua is one of the world's smartest scavengers that preys on young penguins and their eggs. It even preys on the animals in Antarctica. On our Zodiac cruise in Cooper Bay, we came across many groups of macaroni penguins that were resting on the rocky shoreline. The macaroni penguin has the largest population of all penguins. A glacier is a slow-moving mass of ice that is formed by snow accumulating and compacting on a mountain. The black line that runs down the right side of the glacier is a joining mark between two glaciers that have joined further up the mountain. Our time in South Georgia has come to an end, and now we have 2 days sailing on to Antarctica. On our first day at sea, we came across a pod of fin whales migrating south through the Drake Passage. The fin whale is one of the largest animals on the planet, and we were lucky to see such a large pod. Our captain shouted out from the bridge, "Blue whale! Where?" We looked around and I'm sure I got a glimpse of it, but it was soon gone. The blue whale is the largest animal on the planet and are now extremely rare with only 2,000 left in the wild. So we were extremely lucky to have such a rare sighting. On our second day at sea, we came across huge fields of ice. The biggest icebergs with flat tops are known as tabular icebergs, and some of these are as big as the MCG. The sheer size of the icebergs were incomprehensible. Around 15% of the iceberg is above the waterline, and the other 85% is below. We did some calculations and came to the conclusion that some of the icebergs held enough fresh ice that they could have sustained the whole of France for 2 days. This is a huge amount of fresh water in one large iceberg. Even though seeing this was amazing, the wind was bitterly cold. We had to rug up every part of our body in multiple layers, and often your only exposed area was your nose. After 18 months of waiting and planning, on the 29th of December, 2016, we finally made it to Antarctica. We took a Zodiac cruise around an Argentinian research base known as Base Esperanza. This is also where the first child was born in Antarctica. The newest penguin to add to our list is the Adelie penguin. A famous French explorer named D'Urville named this penguin the Adelie penguin after his wife Adelie. Some people say he named it the Adelie penguin because it wore the same grumpy expression as his wife. Penguins are able to propel themselves to great heights out of the water by swimming directly upwards and swimming as fast as they can. This Adelie launched itself 5 feet out of the air in an attempt to land on the ice. The crab-eater seal is a common seal found in Antarctica. However, despite its name, the crab-eater seal dines mainly on krill. In the afternoon, we boarded the Zodiacs and headed out towards a rocky shoreline known as Brown Bluff. Brown Bluff is an ice-capped, flat-topped, 745-meter extinct volcano, approximately 1 million years old, on the Antarctic Peninsula's northeastern tip. We were very excited, as this was our first continental landing. I thought my first landing would be a little more icy, but I am very happy to say that I have stood on Antarctica. We were able to see many more gentoo penguins, much closer up this time. If the food in a breeding season is abundant, then many gentoo parents will have 2 chicks and will be able to raise them both. The firstborn chick is always bigger, because when it hatches, it is fed first. The 2 chicks will have to fight each other for their parents' attention. The white marks around the penguins' nests are their droppings. While the penguins are sitting on their nests, they shoot it out in different directions, creating the effects of the sun's rays. We cruised into Deception Island early the next morning. Deception Island is an active volcano that last erupted less than 100 years ago. You might wonder how you can sail into a volcano, but this volcano was partially submerged underwater. Because Deception Island is an active volcano, the heat and steam from underneath the volcano rises up, and in many patches the water is over 30 degrees Celsius, and it felt as warm as a spa. You are no longer able to swim here due to health and safety hazards. Deception Island was a whaling base for nearly 30 years in the early 1900s. It was then used as a British research station until 1969, when volcanic eruptions damaged the station buildings. The ruins of this station are the most complete remains of whaling history in the Antarctic. On Deception Island, we found an empty aeroplane hangar that was used to house the planes that flew down to Antarctica for research. Our ancestor, Sir Hubert Wilkins, flew a plane many times from Deception Island to Antarctica to conduct research. We walked around the side of the hangar, and not far away we saw a roller. This was the same roller that was used by my ancestor to make a runway for his plane. What a piece of family history! Chinstrap penguins are the most easily identifiable penguins due to the thin black line that runs under their chin. The chinstrap penguin is the second most numerous penguin after the macaroni penguin. The main predator of chinstrap penguins are leopard seals. The Antarctic minke whale is one of the smaller whales in Antarctica. They can grow up to 10 meters long, which isn't actually very big compared to many other whales. The Weddell seal is the southernmost seal and are regularly found on the Antarctic continent. The Weddell seal uses its teeth to bite through the ice, but when they get older, they lose their teeth, can no longer make it to the surface, and eventually die. We found many patches of Antarctic pearlwort, which is one of the only two flowering plants in Antarctica. It was New Year's Eve morning, and we were up bright and early as we sailed into Wilhelmina Bay to go whale watching from the bridge. The scenery was absolutely stunning. The whales that cruised past our ship are known as humpback whales, and there were so many of them. The humpback whale is one of the most commonly known whales due to their friendly behaviour and their playful courting displays. We were able to see an uncommon feeding technique that the humpback whales use to capture and feed on krill. This technique, known as bubble netting, is extremely effective. The whale swims around in a circle below a group of krill and releases bubbles. These bubbles trap the krill and push them closer together. Then all the whale has to do is swim to the surface with their mouth wide open, and it can feed on all the krill that are trapped. The humpback whale has very distinctive white flippers. We decided that we had better go out and have breakfast, otherwise we would miss out. After we had a lovely breakfast, we headed back up to the bridge. One of the spotters on board pointed out to an ice sheet, and there was a lonesome penguin standing out there. Our naturalist guide took a look and decided that this was an emperor penguin. Well, we were blown away. My Nan had held on to hope she would see an emperor penguin, and here it was, one little emperor penguin, much further north than you can usually expect to find them from their breeding grounds. Our captain decided that we would stay here instead of moving on like planned, and that they would take small groups onto the ice to see the emperor penguin. We were not going to miss this exciting opportunity, and dressed and prepared ourselves as quickly as possible. We raced down to the lounge where they were boarding to discover that we were going to be the first to step on the ice. The crew on board had prepared a welcome New Year's Eve reception with bottles of champagne on the ice. However, the champagne wasn't much to my taste. The view of the emperor penguin wasn't much better, but the naturalist told us that we were actually standing on an ice sheet that was only 1 meter thick and was floating on top of 500 meters of freezing water. Ryan and I had a taste of the pure, fresh Antarctic ice, and it was delicious. After spending some time with our emperor penguin, the captain decided to leave and sail on to our next destination. However, when we started moving, a passenger on board had spotted something behind the ship. It was a pod of killer whales. It took me a while to find them, as they were so far away and surfaced only briefly. And then I saw them. It was absolutely amazing. The killer whale is my favourite animal, and I had heard that we might have seen them, but I didn't think it would come true. Soon after, there were 2, and then 3 pods, all surfacing in sync with each other. We were able to tell the dominant male in the pod because the male has the tallest and straightest dorsal fin, and they could be as tall as 2 meters. "Leopard seal!" someone on the bridge shouted. An adult leopard seal was swimming around an ice floe, and our ship was passing by it. We didn't get a very good look, so we rushed down to the back of the ship, just as it was passing by again to get a better look. Our captain decided since everything was here, there was no point in continuing on, so we would go for a good Zodiac cruise with the humpback whales. We had a magnificent New Year's Eve dinner in the formal dining room, but it was a little crazy later with objects being propelled across the room. The next day would be our last in Antarctica, and we arrived at Nico Harbour in the morning. There is a huge glacier at Nico Harbour that carved many times while we were there. Carving is when chunks of ice break off a glacier into the ocean. There was quite a walk up to the top of the mountain, where we had a magnificent view of the glacier. Our last and final stop in Antarctica was Danko Island. Danko Island would be our 3rd continental landing, which is extremely lucky. But first we had a Zodiac cruise around the ice floes where many Weddell and crab-eater seals were relaxing on the ice. found a group of over 50 penguins that were porpoising as a group to herd the fish and krill. By working as a group, the penguins had a greater chance of catching a meal, and because the group is large, there is a lower chance of a singular penguin being eaten by a seal or killer whale. Traveling through snow can be exhausting for a penguin, so all the penguins use the same path. These paths are known as penguin highways and make it easier for the penguins to travel because they have worn down the paths in these areas. We travelled up another mountain for a spectacular view of the ice and mountains around us. Even though it was only 0 degrees, we actually heated up quickly and had to take off our Antarctic parkas. The snow on top of the mountain was about a foot deep. We had a huge snowball fight with the soft snow to finish off our time in Antarctica. Although our journey may have come to an end, this will be one that we can cherish forever. Edwin Michelberg said, "Antarctica left a restless longing in my heart, beckoning towards an incomprehensible perfection, forever